I wanted to share some thoughts about how I became a confident comprehensivist. My story is it took about 10 years. Although I've been comprehensive-minded since youth, the practice of comprehensivism isn't yet a well-supported tradition. I had no mentors, no role models, very few historical personas to reference. Reading Buckminster Fuller gave me confidence that the heterodox idea of being a comprehensivist was possible and important. How did practicing my comprehensivity become confident enough that late last year I organized Collaborating for Comprehensivism, and then starting in July, Shrikant and I have been organizing Comprehensivist Wednesdays and sometimes Sundays. For me, it developed from organizing discussion topics that I thought were important for helping myself or others, mainly through the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society, trying to understand a bit more about these topics that I felt were important. Each topic was a bit beyond the edge of my understanding. Each one I had to stretch into. At first, I organized simpler topics simply on articles or books, things I may have been familiar with, videos, free online courses, the ones that I thought seemed important for understanding the world and how it works and how our civilization works. I spent effort organizing questions to guide participants to thoroughly explore these subjects in events at the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society, so that participants could discover them for themselves. Buckminster Fuller had this idea of no pre-digested knowledge, that you discover it for yourself, that you think it through fresh each time. I conceived of it as explorations. I wanted to learn from others as much as I wanted to make sure the ideas that I thought deserved a seat at the table had a seat at the table. Frequently, I came to realize errors in my own thinking, which led me to rethink and research and explore on my own before I'd come back to the Thinking Society with another topic. The Thinking Society can be a very critical place, and none of my favorite ideas ever escaped unscathed from critique. For at least the first 5, maybe 7 years, I felt pretty flat-footed and struggled to support my ideas, mostly unsuccessfully. I thought they had value, but the critics usually probably walked away thinking they had won each event. But I was undeterred. I came back and organized follow-up topics to try to imagine thinking things through afresh from scratch, how even these skeptics might start to glean that there might be another way of interpreting the world, that that maybe their critiques weren't the only way. And even today, because I'm always exploring topics in which I have too little experience, it can frequently happen that I can't effectively respond to critics because very often I can't anticipate all the things people might say, all the nuances of a subject. But very gradually, by degrees, over the last decade, I started around 2010 organizing topics. My topic planning started to get better at anticipating the resistances and objections that participants might have. By degrees, I learned how to better formulate questions and stories that could spur reflection and rethinking, even in the most strident and self-certain critics. By degrees, the ideas I thought were important started, instead of being sort of rejected out of hand, that's not the way we usually think about things, how could it be true? Suddenly, more and more people started to see them as possible, reasonable, worth thinking about. I didn't start out smart about any of these things, but by listening to others, I was able to strengthen my own thinking. In fact, the whole process has now convinced me that thinking is a social process. It depends on the inputs of others. Only through dialogue with others can we thoroughly think through an issue and all its nuances. That's why I think it's important for participants to organize their own topics. You have a genius about you that needs to be released. You can potentiate your genius by organizing topics on the edges of your understanding. Maybe you would need some help to get started. At the Thinking Society, Joe, I think Maritza, maybe David asked, maybe even Maxine, I haven't talked to Maxine, she's here, can help you engage your germ of an idea to organize a session for Comprehensivist Wednesdays or at the Thinking Society. I know Shrikant is busy. He's putting together all these sessions, so he needs presenters with ready-made topics. But maybe if we can organize a group of coaches and mentors, we can develop a pipeline of topics to feed to Shrikant. And myself and these other Thinking Society experienced coaches and mentors and some 52 Living Ideas people, we can explore more people's ideas so that everyone's genius can be released. When you do this, it involves subjecting your topic, your baby, to the resistance and critique of others. That is hard. Sometimes it's excruciatingly hard. We always want our ideas to win the day, like in the movies. And if you're anything like me, you're going to be clumsy at first. But it works out. Each discussion moves things forward. For me, it took about 10 years to acquire sufficient complex of learning needed to become a confident comprehensivist. I needed to learn how to learn a lot of subjects, which my background was negligible. It required carefully listening to objections, questions, and critiques. I needed to pick myself up from my disappointments and try to imagine how to curate new topics to introduce context, values, ideas, perspectives that might help skeptics and others with their entrenched, conditioned reflexes to begin to see merits in other ways of thinking and being. But by engaging this process of applying curated ideas about important issues in our worlds to the continual feedback of others through listening, focused dialogue, at the Thinking Society, I developed this confidence in my comprehensivity practice. If you start organizing curated explorations of the ideas and values important to you, you too can start to release your genius and help us all better understand aspects of the world that we may have overlooked. Both 52 Living Ideas and the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society need your ideas about what we should be exploring. Come, participate, and learn to accept your own genius.